We've all been shaped by a teacher, right? But have you ever stopped to wonder what exactly shapes them? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the incredibly complex journey of a pre-service teacher in South Africa. We're going to navigate that intense, sometimes frustrating space between the gritty real-world classroom and the rigid, sometimes completely out-of-touch ideals of educational policy. It is a wild journey of identity, struggle, and honestly, profound transformation.
We're following a really fascinating three-part arc today, based on the insightful reflections of a University of Johannesburg student, K.R. Malewa. First, we'll look at the student-teacher's reality. Then, we'll dissect the ideal teacher myth, break down 6 dimensions of teaching, and finally, look at bridging the gap.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the student-teacher's reality. We really need to establish the baseline here for a fourth-year pre-service teacher growing up and learning in post-apartheid South Africa.
Think about the current me foundational identity. You know, a teacher doesn't just waltz into a classroom as a blank slate. Not at all. Their identity is heavily shaped by their personal background, their deeply held values like fairness and respect, and crucially, their work-integrated learning, or WIL. These practical, hands-on experiences in diverse classrooms, that's exactly where the theory hits the pavement.
But here is the catch. Researcher Zivkovics makes this really powerful observation. The years we spend as pupils actually create personal beliefs about teaching that are often diametrically opposed to what is taught during academic training. Think about it. You spend 12 years watching teachers, and you think you know exactly what the job entails, right? It's kind of like thinking you can run a Michelin star kitchen just because you've eaten at a bunch of fancy restaurants.
And that stark realization leads right to our next point. Through lived experience, the student quickly realized that learning to think like a professional means completely shedding the incredibly naive assumption that teaching is easy. It is so much more than just standing at the front of a room and delivering facts.
Work-integrated learning proves this almost immediately. As researcher Gravitt points out, surviving diverse, unpredictable classrooms requires a really complex range of behavioral and management skills, plus sharp discernment. You literally have to know what to do and exactly when to do it in an environment that can shift in a split second. These harsh, unpredictable realities forced a massive cognitive shift for the student-teacher. They had to move away from focusing solely on equality, which, remember, is giving everyone the exact same thing, and instead prioritize equity. Equity is about giving learners what they actually need to succeed, and that's the true path to promoting real social justice and inclusivity in a highly unequal landscape.
Which brings us to the antithesis. Section 2, the ideal teacher myth. We've seen the reality, but now let's look at the striking conflict between what official policies expect and what the classroom actually demands from you. Society and educational policy often imagine this ideal teacher who perfectly embodies absolute authority and total neutrality. They picture an educator who is purely authoritative, perfectly disciplined, and completely unbiased. But we have to ask ourselves whether that is actually realistic. I mean, can you be perfectly neutral when your students are facing massive systemic inequalities every single day? There is such a stark contrast between expectation and reality here. On one side, you have policies, like those from the South African Council for Educators, mandating a well-managed, orderly, highly controlled environment. But on the other side, you have the gritty, under-resourced reality of rural, multilingual schools where teachers are juggling massive class sizes and wildly varying learning abilities. It's a completely different world. When holistic, top-down policies completely ignore these real realities, something really unfortunate happens. Teachers are stretched to their absolute limits, and they often resort to what Paulo Freire famously called banking education. It's where students are essentially treated like empty ATMs. Instead of active, engaging learning, education just becomes about depositing facts through memory, repetition, and rote learning. Students passively memorize textbooks, which sadly ends up further marginalizing the disadvantaged learners who need dynamic support the most.
The structural hurdles are just immense. Even with progressive policies like White Paper 6, which aims for inclusive education, teachers are struggling. And why? Because of severe systemic challenges. We're talking intense language barriers that require constant code switching, a glaring lack of technological resources, and enormous learner numbers. You simply can't just mandate inclusion from an office building. You have to physically resource it in the actual classroom.
So how in the world do we resolve this immense friction? We move to our synthesis. Section 3, 6 dimensions of teaching. How does a teacher actually survive and even thrive in this gap?
Think of it as a conceptual handshake between the current me, those raw realities and the background the teacher brings to the table, and the ideal teacher, the goals and ethical standards they are striving for. And the glue binding them together? Reflective and reflexive praxis. In plain English, that means not just thinking about what happened in class, but deeply, critically questioning why you reacted the way you did. It demands constant, critical self-awareness.
To actually bridge this gap, the student adopts 6 core dimensions of teaching. This provides a really structured, highly logical pathway to develop professional capability without just burning out or losing their ideals entirely. Let's zoom in on a few of these.
The absolutely crucial starting point is establishing a professional identity. As researchers Beauchamp and Thomas describe it, this is way more than just a job title. It gives the teacher a framework to figure out exactly how to be, how to act, and how to understand their unique responsibilities within a democratic society. It is literally their professional true north.
Then we have moral purpose. There's this incredibly powerful quote from Abbott, reminding educators that building a strong, fair society requires embracing struggle with absolute integrity. In a flawed system, conflict is just inevitable. But the ethical teacher doesn't despair when things get tough. They use that friction to drive positive change for their students.
And this translates directly into pedagogical beliefs. Instead of that banking knowledge approach we talked about earlier, the student-teacher intentionally chooses to be a facilitator. By using learner-centered approaches, think discussions, debates, and role plays, they actually empower students to discover concepts for themselves, rather than just passively listening to a lecture.
Now, let's explore how all these concepts tie together in daily active practice. Section 4, Bridging the Gap. When it comes to day-to-day classroom management, the source material highlights a really critical choice. The student completely rejects the rigid, top-down, authoritarian discipline that traditional ideals often demand. Instead, they lean into restorative practices. This means addressing behavior in a way that builds mutual respect, ensures the consequences actually match the offense, and develops genuine responsibility in the learner.
Ultimately, this journey never truly ends. Lifelong learning is the essential final tool here. Through continuous reflection, engaging with MOOCs or online courses, and diving into continuous professional teacher development cycles, teachers learn to adapt to incredibly diverse contexts. It's this ongoing, relentless growth that allows them to creatively integrate rigid curriculum requirements with inclusive methods, successfully navigating that constant tension between policy and reality.
As we wrap up this explainer, it's clear the teacher's journey is an incredible balancing act of identity, resilience, and just constant learning. But I want to leave you with this critical question to chew on. Instead of just expecting teachers to bear the entire weight of this broken system, how can our education systems better support the educators who are actively standing in the gap between flawed classroom realities and impossible policy ideals? Keep asking those big questions, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.